All right, welcome everyone. Today we are going to continue on our journey for Tao Te Ching, and today we will continue from chapter 66 and 67, and probably go one more chapter if we have time. So our regular rule, we start from reading your own translation, and then Amang and I will share our translation, and then we can discuss. And at least for the first 1.5 hours, let's focus on the chapter we are discussing, and then later on we can have a broader discussion on general idea of the Taoism. Okay, so let's start from chapter 66. Is anyone want to read your translation? So we have Joe and Kwang. Please, Joe.
Okay, I'm reading from Derek Lin,
Okay, that's great.
number 66. Rivers and oceans can be the kings of 100 valleys because of their goodness and staying low, so they can be the kings of 100 valleys. Thus, if sages wish to be over people, they must speak humbly to them. If they wish to be in front of people, they must place themselves behind them. Thus, the sages are positioned above, but the people do not feel burdened. They are positioned in front, but the people do not feel harmed. Thus, the world is glad to push them forward without resentment, because they do not contend, so the world cannot contend with them.
Kwang, please.
Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 66. Why is it that the rivers and the ocean, like kings, can lead the many valley streams? Knowing how to stay below, they draw to them the many higher streams. For this reason, wise and worldly rulers wishing to remain above their people need to stay below for what they say. Or if they wish to go before their people, they need to take their place behind. Beneath such rule, the people feel no weight. Such leadership, the people feel no threat. All the world rejoices and supports them and never tries to cast such rulers off. It is not because they will not strive that no one in this world can strive with them.
Thank you, Kwang. David, please.
Yes, so I'm reading from the Legs translation. That whereby the rivers and seas are able to receive the homage and tribute of all the valley streams is their skill in being lower than they. It is thus that they are the kings of them all. So it is that the sage or ruler, wishing to be above men, puts himself by his words below them, and, wishing to be before them, places his person behind them. In this way, though he has his place above them, men do not feel his weight, nor, though he has his place before them, they do not feel it an injury to them. Therefore, all in the world delight to exalt him and do not weary of him. Because he does not strive, no one finds it possible to strive with him.
Thank you, David. And Mike, please.
Sure, this is Stephen Mitchell. And, all streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. The master is above the people, and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people, and no one feels manipulated. The whole world is grateful to her because she competes with no one. No one can compete with her.
Thank you, Mike. So let's start to Among and my translation.
All right, I will read from my copy. Give me one sec. There we go. Excuse me. Chapter 66, River Sea. The river sea is the king of all basins because it is good at staying low. Therefore, it is the king of all basins. For this reason, when the sage intends to reign over the people, he should speak humbly. When he intends to lead the people, he should stay behind them. Hence, the sage is positioned above the people, but people don't feel his weight. He stays in front of the people, but people are not troubled. Hence, the world gladly esteems him and never resent him because he doesn't vie. The world cannot vie against him.
Yeah, thank you, Amand. I think most of translation are basics is similar or basics the same. And some minor thing I'd like to point out is the word here used is so-called gu, okay? And today's translation is vadi. That's why you see the translation sometimes talk about vadi. And then I keep the entire text consistent with this word. Gu means valley, but with water. So I translate as basin. Okay. I think the base word I believe should be stream. Like the image would be the all the stream, hundred of stream will flow all the way to the ocean or a big river. Basically, it means the Yangtze River. Okay, so or to the ocean. So I think that's the image, but the word I choose is basin. So the explanation is the ocean or river sea is the king of all basin because it's the largest one. Why is the largest one? Because it stays in the lowest place. So that's the phenomenon the author is talking about. So again, the way of teaching is talking about the nature phenomena. You can see this one is the king of all basin. Why? Because it stays in the low position. So it draw a conclusion. A sage, if you want to be the king of all people, you need to speak humbly. You want to lead the group, you should stay behind. So that's why, if you are above the people, people don't feel your weight, and then you lead the people. The people do not resent you. So the final conclusion, this one is talking about 不争. Okay, not I translate as he doesn't vie. So the world cannot vie against you. So I've been few years ago, I've been working on this word, 不争, and I had running through with content, strive, compete, and eventually I decide to use vie, V-I-E. Another reason is I try to be consistent with other chapters. So, for example, in probably today or next week, we were talking about is chapter 68, which sounds like a continue from this one, talking about not vying, okay, or not contending, or not competing, not striving, and that's the choice, word choice. We make a decision as vie. But it's not 100% sure. But at this moment, we decide vibe could be the best word. Okay, so that's what I need to say. And then Amang, please.
Thank you, Jason.
Is your background is it real or just?
Yeah, that's really quiet behind me.
Okay.
And fortunately, there's nobody blowing a leaf blower anymore, which stopped just before the meeting started. So serendipity. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. It's great to see everybody, and I'm glad I got to do this again. Chapter 66. It's worth remembering the overarching theme of the second half, or in this case, the first half of the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao Ching in our case, because this is about the cultivating your character, cultivating your naturally emanating self. Last week, when we were having this discussion, we talked about mystical De, this deep sort of empowerment that someone has to do something. I brought up Alexander the Great because there were many Macedonians, there were many people educated, in Plato's Academy and by Aristotle, but this unique individual had the charisma to actually gather people to him, lead from the front, and inspire them to follow him. That he had a De. It's worth reminding people that is not like innate fate or something that you are simply born with. There is a component of that, but you have to cultivate it. You have to actually sort of do what will bring out that best, deep, natural De character, virtue, power, however you choose to translate that word. And we choose to keep it as its original Chinese because it is something more profound than just some English proxy version. So here's your instructions. How do you cultivate this stuff? You learn to be low. You learn to accept the humble position. You act in this way because you can see in nature the great Yangtze River, which is if you've ever seen it in person, it is just a dynamo of power that propels everything to the sea. I mean, that they built the Three Gorges Dam was kind of nothing shy of a miracle because nobody thought that river could in fact be tamed in any kind of way. Mao Zedong often showed off his prowess by swimming across it. Just being able to do that was something of a Herculean feat, like or dislike the man. And so here they're using the Yangtze as the living exemplar of how one cultivates their De. Why does this image work? Well, it starts from a stream. It's a trickle. It's a tiny little thing, but by keeping there, by persistence, it builds that power. It causes, through its own gravity, things to accumulate to it. And this is the advice that Lao Tzu is giving to rulers. If you want to be a genuinely powerful ruler, you do not need to have the people feeling like you're stepping on their necks. You do not need to sit from the back and call marching orders. You stay in front, but people don't feel like, oh God, there he is. They're inspired by you. They want to be around you. And the great leader should also have sage-like qualities. He uses the sage as sort of there's the lodestar. There's the point you're aiming for. And by being a sage ruler, a la like Plato, a philosopher king, you will be the best kind of possible ruler. This idea of not vying is very important. No river vies with the Yangtze. They flow to it. They do out of no choice. There isn't another river that sort of, there are tributaries that are impressive. There are areas along it that you would think this is as big as it, but when you get near the estuary where it actually meets the sea, you actually see that full unleashed force, and it's fairly undeniable. Yeah, I think all of this is pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of crypticness to this, but it is worth remembering what is this instruction for. It's not just for leading. You lead by developing your De. This is an instructional how you actually do that.
All right, thank you, Aman. And then let's have a discussion on this chapter. If you have a question and you have a comment, please raise your hand, and Madeline, please.
Well, thanks, you two. That was really lovely. I do remember, I feel like we just discussed this like a month ago. I don't know why. I loved the word choices. I loved vi. I thought that was very good. I like the consistent use of the word basin because it does have the connotation of water in a valley. I am wondering if instead of using river -c, if you just use the word estuary. The whole thing seems to have a, why are you guys laughing?
I'm gonna
Because that's among the suggestion, and then
I actually suggested it in parenthetical because the actual Chinese does say river sea, but I do think that a parenthetical that is explanatory, the estuary of the Yangtze, would be beneficial, but it's it's not my call. It was just my suggestion too.
no, I have a please continue. You know, I will explain later. So
Well, I think either way works. If you have river sea in the verse and then estuary at the bottom, or if you have estuary at the top and river sea at the bottom. As long as you have both, it makes sense either way. I thought that I liked it. It made a lot more sense to me than the last time. Because it had this lovely metaphysical feeling to it as well. That you know that people are naturally living in between the source of the stream and the end of the stream where it empties into the ocean. And so that this would be a realm that we inhabit, that people live in. And also that the sage is not oppressive, but instead is something that that benefits everyone as the water flows down, because that's fresh water coming down. And also the sense of something coming from on high, a ruler who might be young, but then the sense of going down into a depression, not a valley, but it would be going down mountains and converging. Sounds very yin as well. So the whole thing, it flows very well, so to speak. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Madeline. You know, and then let me explain a little bit here. I was taking among the suggestion, use estuary and the Yangtze River, because that means we pinpoint, okay, a specific location. And then later I'm thinking about the word Jianghai. That literally means river and the sea. Or you can say river or sea. So we don't know. So I decided to be loyal to the original text, river-sea. And that's up to the reader to decide you want to interpret as river or sea, or you reinterpret as river and the sea, or you want to pinpoint the certain location, the delta, okay, the location, estuary, okay. And that's the reason I changed to river-sea. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
And I wanted to say I respect that decision because although it may have originally meant the Yangtze, the verse is abstract enough that it could be applied any ruler, any place, any great river that runs to the sea. And so I imagine that, you know, a few centuries later, the capital was further north, the information or the text was being used there, and so they were thinking of the Yellow River instead of the Yangtze. And so it does make sense to sort of leave it, but I do think footnoting it is a great idea.
Also, sometimes in English, we just say where the river meets the sea. It's a bit wordy. I also like delta instead of estuary. I think everyone would know what that is, and it also it gives a sense of a pattern and a form, whereas an estuary can be more swampy and marshy and smelly. But delta gives that sense of branching.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I hope that's the word choice I'm using, because I try to be as close as original text. In other way, I hope the non-English reader, when they read the English translation, will have at least the same feeling as Chinese reader read it, in the same way, and give the same kind of room for interpretation. That's the ideal. I know it's difficult, but anyway, that I try to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madeline. And then I didn't plan to explain this, but I'm glad that you pay such attention to the such kind of detail. Thank you very much. Kwang, please.
Okay, so here in this stanza, we have a very typical Taoist explanation of the virtue of the prince. I prefer to say the charismatic virtue of the prince, the Te. And the Te is higher than Tsai, the talent. Because Tsai is something that is a skill that you can develop. Te, you have to develop it too. But it is something which is closer to heaven, or if I use a Christian terminology, it's closer to the divine. So there's a undertone of the chosen one, either from a hereditary basis or from something more, let's say, drawn from the general population. The Confucianist way to say it is much more imposing. It's much more, in inverted comma, aggressive. It might not sound very nice compared to the softer Taoist version. Before going further, I want to answer Madeline's question when I was saying that Te is closer to heaven or to the divine reality. Is it the mandate of heaven? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it is something that has been granted to the chosen one or to chosen ones with an S, but the mandate of heaven is something that is granted by heaven to someone having enough charismatic virtue. But at the same time, and here we are in a kind of circularity, some people would be born with more Te than others, okay? But I don't want to go too much in that because we would have to develop theology here, and I don't want to do that. But what is sure is that the mandate of heaven will be granted to the person, to the chosen one, because he would have more Te, more charismatic virtue than the average people. So I want to come back to the Confucianist way to express it from Analects chapter 12, paragraph 19. Confucius said that the virtue of the true prince is like the wind that bends lesser men below as if they were grass. Okay, so you perceive immediately that it's not a, it's a much less nicer way than to say that the true ruler has to be in the lower position in order precisely to take as theirs the people's mind. Okay, that is from the stanza 49 of the Tao Te Ching. So the true rulers would be in the below, or would be in the lower position to take as theirs the people's mind. But in the case of the Confucianists, the virtue of the true prince is like the wind that bends lesser men below as if they were grass. Here, once again, you can read it as a feudal principle, meaning that it is might that makes right. But you can also read it as a metaphor for the level of infinite awareness. And in the Confucianist perspective, my suggestion is that you have to read it as an indication of the level of infinite awareness, in the sense that the true prince is endowed with such infinite awareness, precisely the Te, the virtue, that his presence is compelling, okay? That the respect would be granted automatically because that Te, and let's not forget that Te is a very important spiritual but also political notion within Chinese civilization. Someone that is endowed with Te, when he come in a room, the people would feel that Te, okay, that compelling power that would show to the other people that they are in the presence of a true prince. So it is for certain that the Confucianist way to express things is not as nice than the Taoist way, but never forget that it's not necessarily the feudal interpretation, even if historically it could have been the feudal interpretation. And I would like to end by the fact that Wang, the king, is a homophone with another word, Wang, pronounced at the third tone. Wang king is pronounced at the second tone. And Wang, the other one, to be attracted, because Wang at the third tone means towards, meaning you are attracted towards the person who have the charismatic virtue, and that is pronounced at the third tone. And to be frank, the second tone or the third tone is almost the same, okay? And that Wang, on the left side is the symbol for movement, and on the right side is the symbol for master. Okay, so it's a play of words between king and towards, meaning that the king is someone having enough charismatic virtue so that the people would be attracted towards him. Okay, because in the word Wang, pronounced at the third tone, you have on the right side the symbol for master, and master is exactly like king, except that there is a dot on the top for master. And I finish here.
Okay, thank you, Kwang, for providing the Confucian interpretation here. Amam, please.
Thank you. I wanted to definitely wait my turn. I don't want to abuse my host privileges. I appreciate what Quan was saying about and its character or its quality. I also wanted to sort of come out of about 30,000 feet and point to this dynamic that is at work. I don't want to say dichotomy because it is not a conflict. As Quan expressed it, you could probably surmise is a very Yang phenomena. Yang in the sense that it is observable, outright, powerful. It emanates. It is not in itself simply hidden. Depths of it may be hidden like an iceberg, but the iceberg itself is visible on the surface. And the instructional for cultivating it, for building it, is through very yin means. And so this balance, the overtone that exists throughout the Tao Te Ching, that there needs to be balance of yin and yang in order for a person to really thrive in the world, is reinforced here. The emphasis is constantly towards the yin because yang is so much more easy to appeal, to draw people. Somebody is more inclined to do, the loud, boisterous, look at how charismatic and dynamic I am, come watch me karaoke. That's me, my duh. Not necessarily. If you see somebody who is truly a great singer, because I've used karaoke, I'm going to go on with this sort of analogy. They're not necessarily showmen at first blush. My favorite example of this is the story of Florence and the Machine, and that they discovered their lead singer singing to herself in the bathroom of a pub in Ireland as they happened to be passing by. And the band was so taken by her voice that they basically had to beg and drag her into service of the band. And if you've never heard her, she has an amazing, amazing vocal quality. That's real talent. The inverse of this is what Gene Simmons once said when he was asked about himself as a musician. He said, "I'm not a musician, I'm a showman." He said, "If you gave my music to B.B. King, he could play everything in our library. You ask me to play something B.B. King does, not a chance. I don't have that skill. I don't have that talent. I don't have that though he didn't say it in those so many words." But he was self-aware that his depth of in this particular arena, not nearly as good as somebody who spent the long, arduous time slowly cultivating it through a love and passion of just doing it, not necessarily for performing it for others. That analogy extends to how to actually lead in any kind of situation, according to Lao Tzu.
Thank you, Amam. And any comment, questions about everything? Madeline, please.
Thanks, Ahmad. Something about this, I realize that the sage and the people are not vying, but nonetheless, it reminded me of the descriptions of positioning yourself on the terrain in Sun Tzu. Whether it's before or behind, you're above, you're below. It seemed to have that, a little bit of that feeling to it.
Okay. Any comment? But my understanding is, I didn't go through this, but I do some research. I do realize this word 争, okay, I translate as vie, and some translate as strive, content, competition. I find out this one is very important in Tao Te Ching, because I find out on chapter 3, chapter 8, chapter 68, this chapter 73, chapter 81, all talk about not vying. So Madeline mentioned about not vying with the sage, with the people. I don't see the author is talking about this way. I'm talking about so-called 争天下, vying the benefit from the world. Okay, so you compete, you probably, I believe this one is talking about if we want to bring to the art of war, it's between nation. Okay, so you want to fight for vying for something. Okay, then okay, I think that's the subject here. So I think, of course, it's different than Sun Tzu talking about the art of war. He's talking about the best way to benefit is not vying, okay, not strategically occupy certain position to vie. I think that's the Tao Te Ching try to deal with. Yeah, that's my understanding on this. So, Kwang, please.
Yes, I would like to come back to the fact once again that I think that the Tao Te Ching is something very radical, very fundamental, and very centered on infinite awareness precisely. I would like to read the last 8 lines of Professor Roberts' translation once again. If they wish to go before their people, they need to take their place behind. Beneath such role, the people feel no weight. Such leadership, the people feel no threat. All the world rejoices and supports them and never tries to cast such rulers off. It is not because they would not strive that no one in this world can strive with them. So here we have the depiction of the perfect ruler, okay, that would not be the head of an oligarchy, but rather the ruler who is perfectly in perfect resonance, heart to heart, mind to mind, soul to soul, with, if not all of his all of his people. I was going to say subject, but it would not be appropriate. With all of his, if not with all of his people, at least with an overwhelming majority of his people. Uh, if you read history, and I'm a reader of history, such ruler never appear in real history since the last 5,000 years. The best that we got is, okay, maybe the word is not well chosen, but I would call that an enlightened ruler at the head of an oligarchy, okay? Meaning that he is at the head of an oligarchy, that he will distribute things to his assistants with as much justice as possible. But he's still the head of an oligarchy, and he will try to manage things so that the justice will be served at least, let's say, at 50%. Here we have the depiction of a ruler serving justice at 100%. Okay, I think that it is good as a concept and as an ideal, as an event horizon. I like very much the expression event horizon. And within Chinese civilization, the Gongyang interpretation of the Chun Chu call that stuff, and that is Confucianist. So you have the Confucianist equivalent of that stanza, and call that stanza Da Yi Tong, meaning the great unity. Once again, the Tao Te Ching is absolutely fundamental and radical, and is an event horizon. I'm not against it, but I would say that we are marching towards it, okay? But there's no practical realization of such a stuff on Earth since the last 5,000 years. I stop here.
So we have Paul and Joe, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to build on Kwan's comment with kind of a question, which is, if I'm not mistaken, I could be though, that the translation that Kwan just read put the leader sort of behind, literal, in a more literal way, while in Jason's translation, the leader's in his head, but he doesn't feel like it because he's at the head, but it doesn't feel like it because he's so light and he's humble. But I see a difference in exactly what Kwan is talking about there. And if somebody's trying to operationalize this concept, it becomes so esoteric, essentially, and difficult to go, oh, therefore, like for instance, to use a wolf pack analogy, I think there's cases where the lead wolf goes to the back of the pack because he's protecting the weakest animals. And I'm just trying to talk about how the difference between an esoteric infinite awareness view and something that you can operationalize as a ruler. And I just would wonder, I'd like people's comments on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Any comments? I don't. Okay, that's okay. Anybody can comment. Actually, that's just. My understanding is, I think the best way to. I take this metaphorically. Okay, so not really like a wolf stay on the back to protect the weak. More on the metaphorical. For example, you don't always have your opinion. You don't always the lead, what point to the direction, what need to do. You probably let the group figure out. Then you facilitate as a facilitator instead of leading. That's my own interpretation. And then, but of course, everyone can entitled to have their own understanding. That's.
Can I respond to that, Jason?
Yeah, please.
I mean, it's obvious, it's a metaphor. I'm just talking about the challenge of operationalizing the metaphor. So, okay.
Yeah, that's you can operate in any way you want to do, So I'm not here to teach people or but the only thing I can share is what I learned from this so-called lead from the behind. Okay, so another way to look at is to protect yourself. If you always on the leader, you got killed first. So, Joe, please.
I mean, I think that this is just one of several passages that really speaks to a more, I wouldn't say passive form of leadership. I would say a form of leadership that shows restraint, and that's kind of in line with the Tao 17. If you look about it, where the people think they did it, where that is one of the final lines. And I think that has always been one of my favorite passages, is that it's a relationship as opposed to a dictatorial type of relationship and behavior. So I think that where it becomes much more hierarchical, much more dictatorial, that obviously is is not in relationship with the Tao. And I would say that where if you were to look at it as a relationship with your people, also being adaptable to whatever changes that may occur. I mean, that you see the reference to water in the first line in several different translations. So I think that it's really how not just how you feel, but how you understand your populace feels. And that doesn't necessarily mean yielding to just the tyranny of the majority. That is actually where you're holding higher level ideals, and people tend to gravitate towards that sometimes. That's what it's essentially espousing. So I would, that's how I look at this particular passage. It's in line with a lot of others, and if you really want to get down to it, what are some of the higher level points that are being made? I mean, essentially, it's about humility. But if you also think about what a good leader is going to do, is it's going to be something where that well, I mean, there'll be a bit of I would say spontaneity in their role, and that kind of goes along in with the water. And when I say spontaneity, it's not like you just automatically just whatever you feel like doing that day. It's that you're accepting people's opinions, and that spontaneity allows for new ideas to generate. So I think that that's a very important point in when you're talking about other people thinking about how they participated in the decision-making process.
Thank you, Joe. Before I go to Huang, I want to ask a question, and I hope I get an honest answer. I'm leading this group. Am I doing the right thing as leading from behind, and then Tao is the leader? Okay, I hope I got the honest answer. And if Huang, you probably want to answer this question first.
Well, I can say to you that I feel no threat with you, so it's probably a good thing. and I would say that, well, Jason, your attitude can be characterized as Taoist, but I would say that to please take it as a compliment from me. It can also be an open-minded Confucianist, okay? Because the high form of Confucianism is not tyranny. The high form of Confucianism, the true one, according to me, is the capacity to listen to everyone, to have a discussion, and to get into a common decision, but the people supposedly having more awareness or more knowledge would weigh more, okay? And I would say that it's here that the Confucianists are less shy to put forward the hierarchy rather than the Taoists, because once again, the Taoist the Taoist perspective is an event horizon. Because in my Confucianist way to see things, the true uh, awesome form of government is anarchy, okay? And anarchy is not chaos. Anarchy is from Greek meaning absence of commanders or absence of leaders. Why? Because if we are truly advanced, we will not need leaders, okay? Everyone will be a leader, and that is the ultimate flourishing of mankind, anarchy. But that will take, I think, a lot of centuries before we will reach to true anarchy. And I think that that's why I call the Tao Te Ching fundamental and radical, because Tao Te Ching is probably the first anarchist book in the whole world, because to get true anarchy, everyone needs to be very close or open infinite awareness. And that is precisely the radical invitation, right? And that radical invitation is, rather than might makes right, is might serving right. And to have that attitude of might serving right, you need many people, at least 50%. No, I would say, I said 35% last time, and I would stick to 35%, at least 35% of the population at infinite awareness. And I don't want to forget what I want to say to Paul concerning his how to make it operational. Wow, I would like to mention that in the West there is something like that. Okay, it's the story of King Arthur. In the story of King Arthur, because King Arthur was weak and sick, even nature around him becomes was becoming less flourishing, less blooming. Okay, in the Chinese civilization, philosophical and political ideas, the virtue of the true prince is so compelling that he will not only serve his people, but his majesty. Okay, and here that you understand the true meaning of majesty. The majesty of the true prince is such that he would even influence the natural events. Okay, so here we are very close to religion. Okay, but Confucianism is precisely the attempt to bring it down a little bit, because there is a philosopher called Dong Zhongshu who was born in 179 BCE and who died in 104 BCE, who promoted that idea of the virtue of the prince a little bit like in the story of King Arthur. The emperor who was ruling at the time was Emperor Wu, precisely the guy who chose Confucianism. And he got mad with Dong Zhongshu because he said, but you are exaggerating. If you put my virtues as being responsible of the natural events, you are elevating me to the rank of a divinity. That is too much. Okay, and just to show you that the guy who chose Confucianism as the imperial ideology was perfectly aware of that exaggeration, in the sense that the true prince is responsible for his capacity to listen to the needs of the people or to the situation of the state, and to have the good advisors in order to decide what would be the good choices for the state and for the people. But saying that his virtue, his charismatic virtue, is such has such powers that it would even influence nature, is precisely to go into the direction of idolatry. And I want to mention it because the emperor having chosen Confucianism in 136 BCE, precisely that Emperor Wu, who lived at the same time that Dong Zhongshu, was reasonable enough not to go in that direction. And I stop here.
Okay, let's go to Nick and Joe. Then we.
All right, thanks. Interesting question from Paul on operationalizing the teachings we get. So I just want to share a thought here. Yeah, so this teaching is not, in terms of message, is not very different from what we hear from the business school lecture on leadership. So it's so the true question is, how do we implement it? So in the Chinese thinking, below the headline concepts of Tao and Te, there are a series of smaller concepts that help to form a system and therefore implemented in the societal context. And one of those smaller concepts is relative positioning of the De and the social position of a person. So let's say if somebody like Confucius has the immense amount of De, but he did not occupy any meaningful position in the social hierarchy. He failed. He was not able to secure any meaningful governmental job, even though he wanted some time of his life in order to implement his idea. So that situation will be the alienation, a separation of his De from his societal position. So he had to resort to another configuration, which is to teach his students in order to perpetualize his thinking. Now, the opposite situation would be somebody who is really bad, but was lucky enough to born to the royal family, therefore occupy the seat of the throne by birthright, right? So that person has no De to speak of, but somehow he is the leader of the tribe, of the city-state, of the nation. So here, even though this is the Taoist writing, but I think Lao Tzu implicitly assume a hierarchy of social position. Confucianism actually openly talks about that, but the Taoists sort of implicitly accept that and then say, well, you ought to make sure your De is aligned with your social position. So therefore, the metaphor of the head roof, being behind. So the position of the king, of the ruler, that is accepted by the people. So there's no expectation to change that. But the behavior, the De of the person who occupied the position need to be demonstrated somewhat through either metaphorical or actual behavior. So in the actual case will be, if a country is attacked, the king should not flee at the first time, even though he has the privilege or the access to the escape route. He should stay with the soldiers, with the citizen, to defend the castle or the city till the last drop of the blood. And that will be the manifestation of De. So that's thinking, I guess, but obviously the actualization of that theory in history, has more data points on the fleeting kings, very few data points of the ones who fought to the death together with his citizens, and the few were remembered somehow, as the true example of the.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So let's go to Joe and Madeline. Then we have to move on to chapter 67. Okay, Joe.
Yeah, I'm just going to be brief for a moment. I think that we see what the Tao does so beautifully is simplify some of these concepts, and it captures them in a way that we can all relate. And one of those things that I think is critical in this particular passage is the idea of obviously simplicity and non-attachment. And when I say non-attachment to your ideas, because if you are, where you're not necessarily going to be open to new to dialogue or discussion, then obviously the people are not going to feel like they had a voice. They're going to feel like they're being told what to do. Another example, very practical example, so that would, and I want to get to the operationalizing aspect of this as well, is that how do you teach us to operationalize it? Politics in the United States, they used to say it was about kind of trying to negotiate with one another. Now it's just about stopping the other group. So the idea that now you have a lack of openness and you're actively trying to prevent solutions. So that is the exact opposite of the Tao and what this particular passage is discussing or is kind of capturing for us. So that also gets back to a very important concept that Quan had brought up with awareness. It's when you're talking about awareness, it's awareness that not allowing your own personal desires dictate your actions. So you have to be aware of yourself. And so to a certain degree, there is an element of restraint and temperance, which goes into obviously the ideas of virtue and wisdom. In any case, I think if you're talking about operationalizing it, that you have a set of principles that you kind of are at least open to discussion as opposed to just preventing things to being done. And I think if you take that approach, then I think that that's one way of operationalizing it. Focus on what you're for and rather than what you're against.
Thank you, Joe. Madeline, then we move on. So Madeline, please.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I'm learning a lot. I appreciated what you said, Juan, about Confucianism and anarchism. I was thinking of the ancient Greek goddess Themis. She was one of the Titans. So that was the generation before the Olympians. I'm just going to read from the Theoi mythology website. The Titan goddess of divine law and order, the traditional rules of conduct first established by the gods. She was the divine voice who first instructed mankind in the primal laws of justice and morality, such as the precepts of piety, the rules of hospitality, good governance, conduct of assembly, and pious offerings to the gods. In Greek, the word themis referred to divine law, those rules of conduct long established by custom. Unlike the word nomos, the term was not usually used to describe laws of human decree. So that sounds a lot like what you were talking about. In terms of operationalizing it all, I believe that Themis also was often helped by the god Nemesis, who struck down violators, people who rose above their station, who got dealt too good a hand by fortune, or disrupted the social order. And I don't know if we could have Themis without Nemesis. It would be a good day.
Thank you, Madeline, and then thank you for sharing all different idea about this short chapter. So let's move on to chapter 67, and then we can have a more open discussion. Anybody want to read the translation? 67. The title is Three Treasures. Kwang, please.
Translation by Professor Mose Roberts, stanza 67. All the world declares me great. Be great, but do not seem to be. For it is seeming not to be that makes you great. Otherwise, by seeming so, you would long ago have ceased to matter. We have always our triple treasure, which we rely upon and cherish: a mother's heart, a frugal hand, and no drive to boldly lead this world. A brave heart takes a mother's heart, a given hand, a frugal hand, and one who will not lead to serve as sacred ender of this world, forsaking love for bravery, frugal hand for giving hand, staying back for leading forth, mean entering the gates of death. A mother's heart holds battle lines and also makes defenses sure. The man whom heaven means to keep, it protects with mother heart.
Thank you, Kwang. Can you repeat the second, the very first line and the second?
Okay. All the world declares me great. Be
Declare
great.
me great. Okay.
Yeah. Be great, but do not seem to be. Do not seem to be great.
Do not seem to great. Okay.
To be, but do not seem to be. But I suppose we have to understand: be great, but do not seem to be great.
Okay. Okay. Got you. Thank you. Any who else? Joe, please.
So this is the Jia Fu Fang. Everyone under heaven says that my Tao is great and beyond compare. Because it is great, it seems different. If it were not different, it would have vanished long ago. I have three treasures which I hold and keep. The first is mercy. The second is economy. The third is daring not to be ahead of others. From mercy comes courage. From economy comes generosity. From humility comes leadership. Nowadays, men shun mercy, but try to be brave. They abandon economy, but try to be generous. They do not believe in humility, but always try to be first. This is certain death. Mercy brings victory in battle and strength in defense. It is the means by which heaven saves and guards.
Thank you, Joe. David, please.
Yes. again, see, James Legge. All the world says that while my Tao is great, it yet appears to be inferior to the other systems of teaching. Now it is just its greatness that makes it seem to be inferior. If it were like any other system, for long would its smallness have been known. But I have three precious things which I prize and hold fast. The first is gentleness, the second is economy, and the third is shrinking from taking precedence of others. With that gentleness, I can be bold. With that economy, I can be liberal. Shrinking from taking precedence of others, I can become a vessel of the highest honor. Nowadays, they give up gentleness and are all for being bold, economy, and are all for being liberal, the hindmost place, and seek only to be the foremost, of all which the end is death. Gentleness is sure to be victorious even in battle, and firmly to maintain its ground. Heaven will save its possessor by his very gentleness protecting him.
Thank you, David. I believe it's normal. Then wait, hold on, just 1 minute.
I'll let you get that pulled up.
Okay, here. 60.
67.
Yeah.
Three treasures. Everyone in the world says my teaching of Tao is great. It doesn't seem to resemble anything. It's only because of its greatness that it doesn't resemble anything. If it had resembled anything long ago, it would have been small. I have three treasures to hold and keep. The first is called compassion. The second is called preservation. The third is called daring not to be first in the world. To be compassionate is to be brave. To preserve is to spread out. To dare not to be first in the world so one can become a leader. Now, if one is brave without compassion, spread out without preserving, and strives to be first without staying behind, he will be near death. By using compassion to fight, one wins. To defend, using compassion, one holds strongly. Heaven will save him and use like compassion to guard him.
Thank you, Amang. I think this one is a continue from the previous one. Okay, like we are talking about not vying or not striving, and then the world is not vying against him and leading from the behind. So I think it's just give a little bit more three treasure. And the first the translation is very different from translator to translator. So first the word 慈, okay. I translate as a compassion, and I hear like motherly heart, okay, from Professor Robert, and I heard from Leggy talking about gentleness, okay, very Christian thinking. Or I think the mercy, also another translation. That's the 词, okay. Second word, 俭, okay. So it's translated by Professor Robert, probably the frugal, okay, and that's the modern meaning of 俭, frugal. Also translates, I think it's general translates frugal, and I translate preservation, okay. And then the third one, I just translate word by word. Dare not to be first in the world, 不敢为天下先. Some translation as humility, okay, be humble, this kind of words. But basics, it's the similar way. But the interesting is here, the author try to do is talk about something a little bit paradoxical, right? Be compassionate is to be brave. Okay, that's up to you to explain. To preserve, 简 is to spread out. The word is 广. Okay, some translation as liberation. I think that's too far, because 广 means white. So I think the author's meaning is you have some compassion. That's how you can be brave. If you preserve, remember on the previous, a few chapter ago, talk about 早福, preservation, prepare earlier. You reserve some of them, then you have the potential to spread out. Then the third one will be easier, just like a previous one. If you dare not, you don't want to be the first in the world, then you can become the leader. Then the author try to reverse it, right? If you have no compassion, but you are brave, if you spread out without any reservation, you want to go to the first, but you don't have, you don't want to stay in the behind, and you want to be the leader. Just my example, you want to be the leader, but you stay in front, then you got killed. Okay, so that's near death. That's the logic going, right? They talk of some paradoxical, they use the reverse to tell you that's the death. So then finally, they also focus on the compassion, 慈, right? And bring to the battlefield, right? In the fight, you can win. Used to defend, you can hold strongly. Then 慈, the compassion, is the most thing to guard a person. So I think that's the, I just try to rationalize the whole chapter on this one. And another small thing about is, that's why I asked Kwang about Professor Roberts' translation. Everyone in the world say I'm great. So I think here is a little bit, here he say 我道大, okay, my Tao great. So I have to change from my Tao to my teaching of Tao, because I believe the author is teaching. When the author say my Tao, he's talking about his teaching of Tao. Okay, so that's the word I inserted, and I believe that's what it meant. So that's all I need to say for now. And then Abang, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And it's worth reminding, because I agree, teaching of my Tao is a good way to translate this, because Tao has multiple levels of meaning, including that not just path or way, but discourse is also a Tao. And so in this context, the use of the word Tao has connotation more towards discourse than it does towards path or way, strictly speaking. I agree with Jason in making that decision. Sambao is Taoist ethics. And I can say that because I've taught on this. I've actually delivered a lecture on Taoist ethics using this chapter and using the Sambao. Compassion, frugality, economy. I do like preservation, because it actually also is a good way of translating this idea, especially if you think of this in context. Instruction to a leader, how to lead. What do you need to preserve? Well, you need to preserve the resources you have, so don't empty the grain stores just to host a big party. You need to stock up. That way you would be able to spread it out. If you just try and entertain everyone with bread and circus and deplete your resources, you're not long for this world. That's pretty practical instruction. And of course, that infamous daring not to go first before the world. It seems very self-evident, but it's significant that that word guan, dare, is being used here, because that changes not just to be humble. There is a daring, there is a certain degree of self-leaping of faith that you don't go for first before the world. And this is not the same as what I said about a leader leading from the front versus leading from the back. This is more putting yourself on center stage, making yourself the center of the show, or the first among equals, as the old Roman Senate might have said with a side eye. It takes daring to not do this when you have the power to do this. It's kind of like leading a class and letting them do the talking. Always a little harrowing, takes a lot of tongue biting. You may have to hear some terrible opinions, but that is what it means to dare not to go first before the world. And I want to bring this back to Paul's question of operationalization in a very simple and real sense. How do you do this? Imperfectly, and ever working towards it. We talked about how do I operationalize cooperative anarchy. You don't just achieve it, you work towards it. That is the method of Taoist instruction, not that this is the thing that you do. This is the thing you work towards. And because it is so impossible, you will forever have to work towards it to improve upon yourself. There's no Taoist leader that will say, I am the sage, if they're at all anything honest with themselves, because there's always more striving to do to get lower, more humble, more yin, more compassionate, more capable of preserving your resources externally and internally, and removing yourself from the limelight more and more and more is always something that's going to be hard to do, especially when people seek you out as a leader in some capacity or another. And so it's a paradox that you can't ever achieve this, but you can always be doing it a little bit more and a little bit more. And here those ethics are laid out, because he doesn't say, you do these things. He says, I have 3 treasures. And then he brings them up as an example. But then he says, without these are his treasures, 3 teachings that he shares. But then look at what happens with those who don't use this. If you are brave without compassion, spread out without, what happens? You die. He's pretty unequivocal. Going the other way, foolhardy bravery that is sociopathic or completely without compassion, to give away your resources for the sake of being loved or being, admired or worshiped, and striving to be that person. This is a recipe for an early demise, an early death. At least one would hope, in general terms. There may be an exception that always proves the rule, but I think even if it's not literal physical death, it's probably the death of your time as a leader, because people will not maintain a respect for you. They will see that your duh is hollow, is empty, is not sustainable, and therefore not worthy of their continued, admiration and following. So yeah, I think these two tie together. They are kind of the same lesson, but here you get much more detailed and much more difficult to do, to be compassionate in battle, to be, preserving when the demand is for more from everybody to give up your resources, and to be brave enough to never put yourself first in anything.
Thank you, Amon. So let's have Kwang and Joe. Thank you.
Okay, so I absolutely agree with Amon that stanza 67 is perfectly the continuation of stanza 66, okay, because stanza 67 is an attempt to explain how to put it in operation precisely, the high principles as enunciated in stanza 66. And I would have to say that the three choices of mercy that would be the foundation of bravery, economy that would be the foundation of liberality or generosity, and finally the capacity to be at the back and not to take the front seat as the foundation for leadership. Okay, we all know that to lead, you have to learn how to receive first. Okay, it's a very well-known principle. The other thing that I want to say is that the Confucianist perspective would have a heaven that would grant the mandate to the chosen one having enough charismatic virtue, having enough Te, and that is very Confucianist. In that stanza, you see that heaven would protect spontaneously the one that lives by the universal timeless principles. Okay, so heaven does not mandate Tian Ming, mandate of heaven. So heaven does not mandate a male sovereign in Lao Tzu text, but it does see to the safety of a ruler who lives by the timeless universal heavenly principles. So once again, in Lao Tzu or in the Tao Te Ching, everything is always much more spontaneous, much more natural. Okay, if there's two words in Chinese that would summarize perfectly the Tao Te Ching, one is Wu Wei, and the other one would be Ziran. Wu Wei is the acting but center on infinite awareness, and Ziran means be spontaneous or be natural. So I would say that this stanza speaks of maternal rather than patriarchal authority. Okay, so the Confucian patriarch or sovereign or gentleman, call him like you choose the word you like, teaches his people who are his children. So once again, I always qualify Confucianism as paternalistic, and it is the case. So to follow his example and to be true to him. Okay, so xiao, filial piety, and zhong, loyalty. But the beings created by Tao can only be themselves. Okay, ziran, natural, self-becoming, evolving and growing from their true nature. So ziran, natural. They do not imitate the Tao, nor worship it as superior, even though they acknowledge that they learn from the Tao and would apply its law. So it's when I said that the trunk of Chinese civilization is the motherly expression of Taoism and the fatherly expression of Confucianism, I would say that this stanza expresses perfectly, okay, the same maternal authority, but not the power of the ancestors as been granted by the father, which guarantees the security or the legitimacy of the political ruler, but rather the spontaneous expression of the mercy, the economy, and the humility of the ruler that would grant him as foundation the capacity to be bold, to be brave, to be liberal, generous, or to take the leadership coming spontaneously from his humility. Once again, I said 15 minutes ago that the Tao Te Ching is absolutely radical. And in the last 5,000 years, we never got a ruler like that. And once again, I said that it is an event horizon. It is an awesome ideal that would inspire the rulers and the aspiring rulers to be more and more aware, to move closer to that awesome ideal. I stopped here.
Thank you, Kwon, and sorry about being late. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Madeline. Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, just a couple of things that actually just to give a couple of thoughts on Jason's question, specifically referring to compassion is to be brave. What does it mean? So how does that actually work? And it goes back, and I think that just as Aman and Juan have already stated, it really relates to the previous passage, where if you were to essentially go against the mob or the tyranny of the majority, as I said a little bit earlier, the idea that you're showing compassion for the potential person that is being persecuted, and there's a certain degree of courage that is required in order to actually do that. So that's bravery. So you're going against the mob, and I think that that is, if you think about it from the other perspective, if you're able to, kind of confront mobs and do what you think to be the right thing, you have a set of principles, and if you have a set of principles, that means that you're actually have given some contemplation to how you're living. And I think that that's where you have a set of values. And what the economy aspect of this passage really articulates well, if you have a set of values, that's where moderation actually comes in, because you have to be moderate in relationship to something that you're actually, you know yourself, you understand your desires, you have an awareness. So then you have a set of values, you have a set of deeper sense of purpose. So you understand that moderation in relationship to something like what let's just go back to the example Aman had used. Moderation in the sense that if you're running an economy and you're just acquiescing to the demands of the populace, well, in that particular instance, you haven't really thought about, you're just acting. You're not thinking about, you're not acting in accordance with any kind of virtue. You have also really are just, your values are nothing more than your desires, because all you are essentially is trying to get reelected or even stay in power for some sort, because so you're just essentially bribing people at the expense of others. And that comes back to the idea of what it means to kind of give in to the tyranny of the majority. It's always at the expense of a minority. But if you're just, adhering to a mob, so to speak, or not, or even popular beliefs, then moderation kind of goes out the window. Lastly, I think, the element of humility is very important. Obviously, is something that is throughout the Tao itself. And, there is this idea, I think, that is where there is a right measure in humility itself, meaning there's moderation in humility. You're not overly humble. You're not falsely humble. You don't have false humility, which is a whole nother issue. Because if you were, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to lead. So if you're thinking about this in terms of leadership, that's, I think, these are some important points to consider. I mean, it's the idea of, courage in the face of unpopular beliefs, and essentially moderation in the sense that you have developed a set of values and you believe in them, and that you're in moderation to something, and then humility itself, and that even comes in right measure as well. So those are some just initial thoughts.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Marilyn.
Yes, can you put the text back up on the screen, please? So I had three comments or questions about the text itself. Well, I'll just go ahead while Jason is working on the screen
Do you
share.
want me to share it? Do you want, oh, you got it.
Okay, so that first line, teaching of Tao is great. It doesn't seem to resemble anything. I think I have Kant brain right now, because I'm thinking of Tao as the thing in itself and resembling as appearances. So that would have the connotation of the greatness of the Tao.
Okay.
The next thing was compassion. I don't know if that's a different word than Ren, and if it is, I would love to hear more about it because I get tired of Ren.
Different word. Different
Oh, it
word.
is the same word. Okay.
Oh, no.
All right.
Different word. Different word. Different.
Oh, it is a different word. Okay, so maybe
Okay,
you or Alon could talk about that. And then the third thing was preservation. I remember this. I don't know if this was the same word. It had come up in a previous chapter.
Yes.
I had asked if it meant seeds, and I think he said no, it was more like laying up supplies or storing.
Yeah, okay. So let me answer these two questions, right? So first about this one is 词, not 人, is different. Okay. What's the meaning? I think in Confucius text, you will say the love from the parent to children. Okay, that's why some translation as motherly heart. Professor Roberts translation.
Jason, sorry to interrupt. Can you enlarge the font for some people to see? Thank you.
Yeah, 词, right? So this word is in Confucius text. It means the parent to the children. That's why the professor Robert translated as motherly heart, right? So I think the Confucius means father, okay, father, 父慈, okay, that's the love father to son. But in today we kind of change to mother. Okay, so anyway, we say parent. Okay, so that's a different word than 人. Okay, because in Taoism, it's based in the text, it usually doesn't like consider 人 as a good word, because 人, according to Taoism, 人 has a certain standard. Okay, so on the chapter 5, 天地不仁, the heaven and the earth is no 人, because 人 is bias. Okay, so because you treat people different, right? Because you have something 人, then you have something so-called not 人. So that's the problem. Okay, so that's the text here. Second word, preservation. I know you are talking about, I forget the chapter number. I can find out. It could be on chapter 59. Okay, we talk about 色. Okay, so there's a different word, but I believe they are the same word. I kind of would like to see this word, because the reason I keep this word as a preservation is based on the I think this word has a different meaning in Taoist and in Confucianism. In Confucius text, okay, 温良恭俭让, okay, that's the words 俭. Confucius has this kind of quality. So in Confucius, this word, I think it means frugality. You don't show off, you save. That's in Confucius understanding, Confucius virtue. But in Taoism virtue, I don't see it means frugality, which is also right. But I think the more important is go back to the action or operational meaning, which is preserve thing, which will match with chapter 59. If you want to do something, you need to preserve. And that runs through the whole idea. You have to prepare early, you have to save your energy, you have to preserve your resources so you can go longer. Okay, you will not die, staying behind. So you can say selfish if you put it this way, but take care of yourself. Okay, and I think that's the reason I make this translation. So I think one thing I don't know if that's your question or not, I translate as resembling everything. The reason is this word, 笑. Okay, 笑 means same, look the same, but not all the same. So I think resemble, seemingly could be the right word to do it. Yeah, thank you. So I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else has any questions, comments? Go ahead. Amon.
I'm going to find myself in an incredibly odd position because I appreciate Madeline's comment about being tired of Ren. You get very tired of Ren when you're reading Confucius. He emphasizes this point, and it is, I think, poorly translated when people use it as translated as compassion, or humaneness is closer. I will say that having done 15 books of the Analects, I've grown to have a greater respect for the concept of Ren, because I think there is something very profound to the idea that but for you am I. The idea that a person is not a person in themselves. 自然. It's not the thing itself. It exists and it has meaning because of how it is in relation to others. But this idea of 自 is very different. I put the etymology into the chat, and you can see the two components of the character are heart and now. And this is a very different kind of idea of compassion. What is the heartfelt thing to do now? That doesn't constrain one to just in consideration of another. It actually is in consideration of more than just other individuals, like my granddaughter hiding back there. It's in consideration of other phenomena all around you. What is the heartfelt thing to be taking into consideration in the moment now? Which is why, I always look for the recycling before simply going to the trash can. It would be a small bit of effort on my part to be a little more considerate in a moment when I need to get rid of a plastic bottle or whatever it is at that time. And gem, the word that has been translated as economy, that Jason and I are translating as preserving, is made up of two characters, person and all. And this actually is a concept probably closer to Ren than Zi, because you can see the character for person exists both here and in Ren. But here it is the person and all in consideration. So not just in consideration of a person, all people. This is, I don't want to say a refutation of Ren, but an expansion of the idea, or an invitation to expand the idea greater beyond just you and another. It's you and all others. Yeah, so that was the 2 cents I wanted to drop into the conversation and be an apologist for Ren all at the same time.
Thank you, Amon. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Quan.
No, I think that was actually a really good summation of Ren, and as we've gone through that and Confucius many times, it is in relation to the other, meaning it's about not necessarily. It is about cultivating character, but it's cultivating character in relationship to bringing harmony. So that is a much deeper kind of, or not much different idea than some other philosophies that actually look at cultivating character from within. There are different ways of actually acting in the world, and so based on that philosophical approach, I think that's very important to capture. And I also think there is a relationship, and maybe this is more of a question than it is actually a point. There is seem to be, a very, very strong emphasis on ritual in Confucianism. And I think that ritual is a way of building a common bond that exists, so that when you're thinking about how Ren relates to that, you're thinking about how it relates to the society as a whole, as opposed to just thinking about it from a cultivation of within. So the strong influence of ritual that or even the focus on ritual that Confucius is talking about, even after 3 years, you're supposed to be for 3 years mourning the dead. Was it not that? I think Amon shook his head. Was it not 3 years? Oh,
I was not denying you. I was denying.
I just don't. I mean, I just don't recall offhand. But I thought it was 3 years. Jason, do you remember? Or
Excuse me?
3 years for essentially mourning with Confucius. It's not really that important, but I'm just talking about more about the relationship with ritual, and how the ritual becomes much more important when you're talking about how it's you relate, how it bonds, it creates a bond, and that's how essentially Ren is, as Aman was saying a little bit earlier, it is in relation to the other, which is, again, it's very different than an individualistic approach. As far as the other aspect of the passage that we just read, I think it's, we talked about it as well, as just what happens if you ignore the virtues and how self-destructive it actually is. So I could give you countless examples as to how virtue itself promotes a social harmony, and that you're thinking about your interactions with, how you're acting justly towards someone else, and how that requires wisdom. And I can provide a lot of examples, but I don't think I need to necessarily go into them. But obviously the opposite of that, which we were talking about selfishness just a little bit ago, the opposite of that would be would lead to an internal implosion, both on a personal level and a societal level. So when the lack of virtue is practiced, where there is deceit, where there is seeking, not necessarily working with the people, but working to dictate to the people, as the previous passage had talked about. Then in that particular instance, I think that you can see where the contradictions and animosities start to arise, and how that creates a lack of harmony. So anyway, those are just some quick thoughts.
Thank you. Next up is Quan, followed by Nick.
Okay, so I would like to come back to the throng of Chinese civilization make the Taoism and Confucianism. I would say that if there's two notions that are at the center of Taoism, is precisely Wu Wei and Ziran. As I say, Wu Wei, there can be many definition or explanation, but I would say that Wu Wei is to act center on infinite awareness, and Ziran is the self spontaneous development. And so in Taoism, the invitation is to be one with the other, but at the level of the upper trigram, okay? Because in Ziran, Zi means self, but understand that self with a small s and self with a capital S, okay? The two self together. And a Ran, you have the symbol for a piece of meat. You have the symbol for a dog. Yes, it's a dog. And you have the symbol of fire just under. Okay, so what is that? Ran means with a piece of meat, a dog, and fire. You have to understand that it's in the process of the cooking of a piece of meat. Okay, so the process of cooking a piece of meat is a process of becoming. Okay, so that Ran is the process of becoming from the small self to the big self. Okay, Ziran. So the Taoist invitation is truly that we meet each other in the upper trigram, okay, in infinite awareness, in Ziran. Self, capital S, becoming self and self, upper trigram. And Wu Wei, once again, which is the operationalization of Ziran, if you want, okay, because Wu Wei is to act being centered on infinite awareness. So those two are the major concept of Taoism inviting us to be together in the upper trigram. For Confucianism, the two equivalent concept is a run, or rather run, and shu. I just want to come back briefly to run because Aman explained it in an excellent manner. Run on the right side, left side is person, and on the right side is number 2, meaning that a run, the foundation of the idea of a run is that we cannot be alone. We have to be 2 at least, okay? So everything that concern human relation, human bonding, human interactions. So that a run, for me, is much more in the lower trigram, okay? Meaning that what is integrated in the upper trigram has to be expressed on earth in the lower trigram, okay? And when I say that the lower trigram is the animal kingdom, I think that everyone in this group is bright enough to understand that there is no inferiority in the animal kingdom in my mind, okay? Meaning the kingdom of flesh and of bone and of blood, okay? The kingdom in which we need to eat, we need to go to sleep, and we need to clean our body, okay? That's the only thing that I mean by the animal kingdom. So Confucianism is an invitation for all of us to meet each other in the animal kingdom, okay, a run. And the other big concept of Confucianism is shu, S-H-U at the fourth tone, shu. And that shu is written a woman, a mouth, and the heart, okay? So, and shu, most of the time when you have to translate it by one word, the usual translation that I think is good is reciprocity. Or I prefer another translation which requires 3 words, and it's consideration for others, or consideration for the feelings of others. Or if you prefer, 1 word, respect, okay? Respect is you have consideration for the feelings of the other, or of the others with an S. So maybe respect is even better than reciprocity. So I come back to the 3 elements: woman, a mouth, and the heart. So you are centered in the kindness of the heart when you speak to others, because you have the kindness of the heart of a woman. Okay, so woman, mouth, heart. So all those words to say that both, that's why I said that the trunk of Chinese civilization is the motherly teaching of Taoism and the fatherly teaching of Confucianism, because we all know that a father, the love of a father, is conditional on your success, okay? The father wants results, and he will judge you as being not adequate if the results are not good, okay? So those results are seen in the animal kingdom. And the love of a mother is more unconditional. So it is the meeting in the upper trigram, in infinite awareness. And the love of a father is also a teaching of infinite awareness, but with the requirement of concrete achievements in the animal kingdom. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. Great. Next up is going to be Nick, and then we will wrap up this meetup. And I want to talk to Quan, if he's willing, about the I Ching, and any thoughts about I Ching. So, Nick,
I always want to talk about I Ching.
Wonderful. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I have a comment on Madeline's first question, but before I do that, I just want to briefly reply Joe on the length of the mourning period. It's over 3 years. However, it actually means 2 years plus 1 day. So if you have done that, you can claim you have mourned 3 years. So that's how practical people were in implementing this rule. So I find it interesting the first comment by Madeline on this text, because this is really a break of texture structure. The very first sentence or the first part doesn't seem to relate to the rest of this verse. It's very philosophical, so it's a deeply philosophical statement thrown into a series of moral teachings which are commonsensical. So how do we understand this first sentence with its deep philosophical content? Here, my reading is closer to the Platonic formulation rather than Kantian formulation, in the sense that Lao Tzu clearly is saying we could access Tao if we, do a lot of right stuff. So this is unlike Kant, who just says, look, we're not able to learn the things of themselves. That's it. So don't ever try. But Lao Tzu is saying, well, Tao is out there. It's not like anything we see. It doesn't look like anything that is sensible, tangible, but somehow we could access it by trying a lot of different things, or by not trying. So in that sense, he's saying something fairly fundamental, not spelled out as a theory of form, but clearly indicating a separation of the Tao with the rest of the tangible stuffs.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so what I want to do is, if I, in the honor of Amon getting his overtime. By the way, Amon, you look a little younger. I don't know whether it is because of the background. I think it is to do with the fact that your granddaughter is around.
That
So
doesn't make me look younger. It probably makes me sound a whole lot older. Hawaii helps everyone look younger. Yeah, I'm glad I could stick around a bit.
So let me ask you one question, because I want to talk about I Ching. Quan did a great job of giving us a little bit of introduction of I Ching. So Amon, how do you see I Ching as being related to Confucianism and Taoism? How do you see, what do you see as a place of I Ching in Chinese thought?
So paramount, everybody in the Chinese tradition is talking to or talking from the I Ching. It is the first amongst classics, and I'm sure, Quan, you probably already mentioned that, because its profundity is really hard to over exaggerate. I'm sure there was some discussion already about the origins of oracle bones and scapulas and using it as a predictive tool, and how this sort of snowballed over time into something much more. The way I personally think of reading the I Ching, it's sort of like getting good at predicting the weather. And that's not to say prediction in sort of the divination sense, or the sense of, but learning the patterns, getting to see what does transformation generally look like in nature, and accepting a chaotic element to it, accepting an unpredictable nature that exists even within sort of those predictable parameters. So I use weather prediction as an example because it's a science, but it's an inexact science. Yeah, the I Ching has levels and then levels and levels. The first hexagram, the first one in the King Wen version of the I Ching is the dragon soaring. It's supposed to be sort of the youngest of yang, if you can say it that way. And it emphasizes that all change has a dynamic catalyst. Something will happen to catalyze change. And that catalyst is a very young phenomena in itself, because it's an action. It's something that occurs. It does it against the backdrop of unrealized potentiality. There has to be an unrealized potentiality for that catalyst to catalyze anything. And that is sort of the end of the I Ching, the yin of yins. Those are sort of the basis to navigate from. So how do you deal with change? There have been Confucians, not to slight them, but I'm thinking particularly of feudal Japan, that believed that the way to deal with change was to ossify the culture, the whole nation. This is the perfect moment, and we will always make it like this. That was, I think Juan would agree, a bold misinterpretation of Confucian ideals, but it is a way that one contends with that inevitability of change. It almost cost Japan their very existence. Won't go over a whole episode of Japanese history. I invite everyone, watch Shogun. It's a wonderful series. It's absolutely incredible. And you can see these very strange confluence of values coming together. Confucianism, Buddhism, yeah, and the traditional Japanese Shinto informs it a little bit, which has almost a Taoistic like flavor, being that there are elements of animism to it. Full disclosure, since I got to stick around for overtime, and some of you know, others probably don't, I am a Taoist. I'm actually an ordained Taoist priest, and I like to say I'm not too religious about it. So much so that Paul had asked about operationalizing this. Small story, years ago, talking with the family, my partner was talking about raising our daughter, and she said, we haven't really raised her religious, because, you know, both of us aren't really religious. And I looked at her, I said, I am a Taoist priest. And she said, but not really. So apparently I am so good at being a Taoist priest that even my family is unaware of my credentials, which is fine. I don't, like I said, I'm not religious about it. I don't try and put it out there. But what that ordainment means to me, and the responsibility, Taoism is a teaching about finding balance, and the I Ching is a tool to inform that in one's own self. When you take on the responsibility of an ordainment, you have agreed to take that responsibility of attempting, and I say gently attempting, to bring balance into communities, but only when you're invited. There are no pamphlets, there's no proselytizing. I will be knocking on no one's door at any time. If I'm asked to perform a wedding, I have done it. If I'm asked to perform a funeral, I've done it. If I'm asked to perform an opening of the eye ceremony for a new temple, I've done it. It's a very loud experience, and you always know it's a Taoist experience when there's lots of smoke, because there's so much burning of stuff. But we don't, I really think, other than one holy war, Taoists have done pretty good in the long run of being Taoist priests, some better than others. And that doesn't mean we all agree on anything other than, yeah, the world is in conflicts of change, yin and yang being probably the most predominant aspects of that change. After that, you could probably get a little bit of argument, and you always need to remember that these are relativistic terms. There isn't a thing that's yin, there isn't a reified yang. Male is yang, female is yin. Okay, sure. But you put me and Arnold Schwarzenegger in the same room, I'm yin. No matter how much testosterone I have, he's the yang one. And so bearing in mind that this metaphor is always to be measured in relation to something else, is how the I Ching actually works to inform me to think, okay, am I valuing this as yin or am I valuing it this as yang? And based on that, what kind of change might I foresee happening? That would be my answer to that.
Fantastic, fantastic. Amon, I want to follow up with a question about a really good, a choice that Kwan made in his second presentation, which I got a lot of mileage out of. And that is he chose to focus on the hexagram 11, where you have the yang down, heaven down in the lower trigram, and the earth up in the heaven place. So that is really, really interesting, because it's like it is showing you, and I think in some ways, kind of connecting it to Taoism, it's very much Taoist. You're trying to bring heaven down, and you have respect enough for the earth to say that it should be like heaven. Any comment, any thoughts on the number 11 and the choice of that?
I is a interesting hexagram because it's a paradox. And I do think that there is, anytime you're talking paradox, you're talking in the playing field of Taoist, because Taoism is an invitation to reconcile paradox. That's kind of what the whole exercise is meant to be, is get over your perception of how it should be, look at what is, and or reconcile those two things so that, is heaven above earth? Well, if we talk about the heavens, but being humble brag, being just recently in the southern hemisphere and now in the northern hemisphere, there are heavens to the south of me as well. So below, very far below. And it is interesting because you can, reconciling that is a exercise in cognitive dissonance. It's taking your normal expectations and going, oh, wow, I just lived through 2 Wednesdays in 1 week, sailing across the international date line. Violates your expectations of the norm. It's also why I was so time damaged the last time we all met. At least now I'm within, US time zones, and no more days flipping. But yeah, change like that can be terrifying for people, because I think people, generally speaking, see change as loss. And they learn that behavior somewhere throughout their lives, because you watch kids, change is a game. My granddaughter was floating around behind my back because she was bored, and this was different than what she was experiencing. And so it was a game of, can I get granddad distracted? And the answer is yes, she can. But I tried not to let her too much, because reconciling the paradox is giving her the license for it and just not letting her go too far with it.
Excellent. So I'll just make a comment. Again, my understanding of I Ching and Chinese philosophy is very, very primitive. And I'm also kind of, my Taoism is the thing that I really, really love. And that's what, I come to everything with. The thing that I find really fascinating about I Ching, and you can comment on it and Kwan can comment on it, is that it is actually kind of, it's a very powerful tool of really grasping the complexity of the change. I love the facts. I like the trigrams and thinking of them as a family, so that it is one family. It's not like, X versus Y, but it's one family. And each of the characters there, the elder son and the middle daughter, each of them have their own nature, own character, and they all interact with one another as they would in a family. I think family is a very profound idea. because it at once shows the individuality and the interaction at the same time. And then when you have multiple, family members interacting, you have all these amazing combinations that are taking place. So it's on one hand integrated and one hand differentiated, but the differentiation is always taking place in the context of a certain integration. And it allows you to express so many different phases. I would use the word phase of the pattern of growth, life and death. And it gives you the alphabet like nothing else. I don't, it's the systems comparatively, the Western system seem to be just too simple and too, this is a very sophisticated system. And I think it deals with the kind of complexity of life much better because of his. So that's my impression. So Aman, and then
I will say one more thing, and then my battery will die. Plus, the family will all be back,
Yeah.
and I will have no shot. But anyone who has studied advanced mathematics, I've said before, at the advanced level of mathematics, the name of the game is assigning value to variables. Take E equals mc squared. That is an example of assigning a value, mc squared, speed of light squared. Energy equals mass times speed of light squared, giving that value to a variable, energy. The I Ching is a tool for assigning values to variables. The difference is that it is so much more concrete in advanced mathematics that this formula must always equal out this way. In the I Ching, at least the way I was trained to read it, it is a name of the game of, okay, so if I assign Tai as the value to this phenomena, what is the predictive outcome? Okay, but it doesn't seem to match that as much. Maybe it's more long, or maybe it's more it could be a different value. And by switching up the value I'm assigning to a phenomena, I'll get a different kind of algorithm out of the equation. And that makes it a tool for sensitivity, for flexibility. I will say, I shared in one of my meetups before, I got to have a meetup with my Sifu, the guy I got to be a Taoist priest from. I shared a picture of his latest I Ching shirts, and I made sure Quan got a chance to see it. His calligraphy is amazing. But this man, who is a paramount figure in the Taoist community, taught one of the most important lessons. We didn't get everything right. That was his really struggles. Confucians did family better than us. I remember him saying this. He was only too clear that to be too intractable in your view, that you must, if you give yourself no margin of error, if you don't see where there is value in others or in other ideas or systems, then you forfeit your right to your own, is kind of the lesson I was given. And speaking of forfeiting my rights, my overtime has completed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Aman.
It's
Excellent.
great seeing you. I'll be back in the gloomy Northwest in a week.
All right, sounds good. Quan, go ahead. What did you think of all these comments?
Well,
you can pick up on anything that you want to pick up on.
Yeah, I would like to pick on the fact that the I Ching is a cosmic game. Okay, it is an attempt. It's a board game. Okay, because it's a stuff that exists in the space-time reality, but that board game is with cosmic meaning. So, and I would like to come back to the fact that I'm on side that, okay, the I Ching is a set of rules, a set of symbols, a set of principles that allow us to ask questions and to propose solution from us, right? And Amon said that the I Ching can be compared to the exploration of patterns, and he gave the example of weather prediction. And I come back once again with the 5 elements or the 5 layers of penetration of reality. Okay, the first layer is nature and life. The second layer is man. The third layer is the mind of man. The fourth layer is the cosmic mind. And the fifth layer is called in Chinese Da Yi Tong, meaning the great unity. Okay, so when you were speaking of the fact that the 8 trigrams, that you like it, that it's like a family, well, precisely that is the Da Yi Tong, that is the great unity, the great harmony, the great togetherness of that family that I call nature, life, man, the mind of man, and cosmic mind. Okay, that's the nature. That's the big family. And the board game that is called the I Ching has that cosmic ambition precisely. And I want to come back to the origin, okay? Because as you know, the I Ching is the philosophical extension or elaboration of some divination practices having started more than 10,000 years ago, but we have a certain tradition called the tradition of the Zhou royal house that has been handed over to us. Okay, so that's why I would limit myself to the last 3,000 years since the Zhou dynasty started in 1046 BCE. And before the Zhou dynasty, you have a Shang dynasty from 1600 BCE to 1046 BCE. The Zhou dynasty received the legacy of how to ask the questions. And here is how the question was asked, because it has been written down on the scapula of oxen, on the plastrons of tortoises, or on bronze, on all the supports. And that the way that the question is asked show that the I Ching is a board game for cosmic game precisely. So you have 4 parts. The first part is the preface. Okay, in the preface, the moment is written down, the year is written down, the name of the king, the name of the diviner, of the aristocrat asking the questions. So it's very personal. Okay, it's a question of personal freedom. So the person involved is clearly identified with the name, with the moment, etc. The second part of the exploration is the questions. But the questions will be followed at the third part with some proposition of answers. Okay, suppose that I ask a question. Okay, will I start that endeavor of opening an academy, for example? Okay, okay, write my name, the name of the king, the moment. So I ask, okay, when I start an academy. And at the third part, I would write, yes, I will start an academy in 10 days with the following subjects. Or answer A. Answer B, I will start the academy only next year because I'm waiting for some teachers that I love. 3, I'm starting an academy after discussing with some friends and teachers. Okay, so I propose 3 answers possible to my own questions. And the last part is I would write down what happened in reality. Okay, did I truly start an academy 10 days later? Or did I wait for another year because I was waiting for some teachers? Or did I start an academy after having discussed with some friends and some teachers? Okay, so the structure of the exploration using the I Ching is a personal adventure of freedom a dialogue between someone and the cosmic mind. Okay, because I said it's nature and life, man, the mind of man, the cosmic mind, and the togetherness that is called in Chinese Tai Yi Tong. Okay, and I was coming back to the primitive ritual, okay, because it was a ritual and not yet the philosophical elaboration. So all the philosophical elaboration in the 10 wings, the Shi Yi, written between 500 BCE and 300 BCE, are only the very intellectual and very conceptual and very philosophical, epistemological, ontological elaborations on that basic pattern of how to explore a situation, a problem, an adventure, a possible adventure, okay, opening an academy, for example. So I want to stop here to see how you react to that before going further.
Sure. I think one of the key ideas here seems to be a conversation. See, what happens is that, and I think the conversation is a very powerful idea. And people don't realize that, because it's like most people say, okay, when you're thinking, you just think. But what you really need is like the feedback, whether from another person or even imagine another person, or saying that, okay, I'm saying this to the universe. What is the universe saying to me? And then you actually consider that. It's not like it is going to determine what you're going to do. It is like a suggestion. But what it does is that it really allows you to reconsider. It allows you to break your habitual patterns. It allows you to see possibilities which you have not thought of. And so this looks like the idea of conversation is built into this process. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because once again, that's why I described the so-called primitive ritual. Okay, it was not a question to the god. Do I need to open an academy? And after that, you make some manipulations and you will interpret if the answer is yes or no. On the contrary, it was built in the process that you ask the question, but after that you give your own answer, and after that you would make the divination and you would make the interpretation. Okay, so once again, life and nature and life, man, the mind of man, the cosmic mind, and Tai Yi Tong, the great togetherness. And I would like to say the first four characters of the first hexagram. Okay, the first hexagram is 6 plane line. The lower trigram is 3 plane line. The upper trigram is 3 plane line. Qian, heaven. The first four characters of heaven, of the judgment on heaven, supposedly having been written by King Wen of the Zhou dynasty 3,000 years ago, is Yuan Heng Li Zheng. Yuan Heng Li Zheng. In the past, it means at the origin, to see what is beneficial, I divine. Okay? But with the original conversation, I prefer to say that, because I was going to say primitive conversation, but there is no primitive conversation. With the original format of the conversation having started 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, but I say 3,000 years ago because I want to connect myself with the legacy of the Zhou dynasty. So with the original format of the conversation, from Yuan Heng Li Zheng, which simply means at the origin, to discover, to explore what is beneficial, I divine, it becomes the creative work's sublime success, furthering through perseverance. Okay, I repeat, the creative work's sublime success, furthering through perseverance. And I remind again the 5 layers: nature and life, man, the mind of man, the cosmic mind, the togetherness of all these things. So it means that at the start, the mindset was already good. Okay, so man is not simply someone who is passive, who is waiting for the orders of the gods, but on the contrary, when engage with the god. Okay, I suppose I would make a very strange rapprochement. Okay, there is an old movie called Stargate from 1994. I don't know, you probably watched it, Srikanth.
I've seen
And
that. Yes.
yes, and you remember the, oh, I'm sorry. You remember the young guy, the young primitive guy who is very courageous, and when he saw the spaceship coming, he would run to go to the spaceship. Okay,
Yes.
and he would be chosen to be the embodiment of the god precisely.
Mhm.
I think that it's exactly that. Okay, the courageous man, the true man, is the man who will not cower, who will not hide himself under the bed when there is a thunder, but he would go to meet the thunder, and he would have a conversation with the gods. Okay, like the young man who would go to the spaceship. So the original creators of the I Ching, even in the primitive phase, had that kind of mentality. Okay, we are going to have a conversation with the spirit, with the god, and not only that, we would propose our own answers. And let's say if the god approve or disapprove, we would take into account the advices, of course. But we want to propose what we wish for. Okay, and after that, not only that, we will write down what happened really in reality. Okay, so already there is that mentality of exploration, of trying stuff, of not being fearful to go to the gods. Okay, you know that one of the concepts in religions is a tremendum mysterium. Okay, so the tremendum mysterium is a sacred fear. Okay, but that sacred fear will not crush you. That sacred fear would make you more valorous, more courageous, more inventive, more creative, because you are in front of something that make you feel fear because it's so awesome and so that and so on. But at the same time, you're not fearful to the extent to be crushed, but that fear would make you courageous, would make you explorative and creative. And I would say that that exactly the original meaning of the attitude of the people having created the I Ching in prehistory, but after that, the Shang Dynasty, the Zhou Dynasty, the Han Imperial House, etc. And the Han Imperial House precisely created that more philosophical perception, maybe before the Han Imperial House, okay, during the Shu Yi, the 10 wings, between 300 BC, 500 BCE and 300 BCE, that the Yuan Heng Li Zheng became the creative works sublime success. Okay, what I wanted to say with the young man going to the spaceship is precisely that. The creative words sublime success, because he was daring, because he was innovative, because he was inventive, creative, and furthering through perseverance. Okay, so one step lead to the other, and etc.
Excellent, excellent. One thing I was thinking of when you're speaking is, a conversation by its nature is yin yang. You're continuously going between yin and yang. You're kind of doing something, and then you are being receptive, and that's the cycle that is going on, which is a very powerful way of dealing with things, as opposed to just doing yang yang yang, or just yin yin yin, because there is no feedback. It's like it is limited. But yeah, so I really look forward to exploring this further, Quan, and we will come up, write to me, and we can just propose what direction you want to take it, because this looks like there is many directions to take this in. Not just trying to do like a course on I Ching. I think its power is to just show it as a toolkit for various things. And people are, it's for me, even like it's like saying, okay, now if I want to use I Ching here, what would happen? And it always produces very interesting results on many different kinds of problems. So what do you think?
Well, I think that you are simply following the suggestion of the God, furthering through perseverance. The Yuan Heng Li Cheng precisely, because it's precisely that. Okay, because the I Ching is a board game. Okay, because it's truly a board game, but for exploring. Forgive me, I think it's the fourth time I repeat that, but because that is the center and the core of the I Ching. It's the board game for exploring with fun. Okay, it's very important with fun. Nature and life, man, the mind of man, the cosmic mind, and Tai Yi Tong, the great togetherness of all those people. And it's dynamic. Okay, I repeat, the creative words, sublime success, furthering through perseverance, because the creative is in nature and life, it's in man, it's in the mind of man, it's in the cosmic mind, and in the togetherness of all those people. And that is precisely being and becoming. Okay, because you know that I Ching means the classic of changes and of being, because Yi means changes, but also means unchange. Okay, most people forget that, because the book, it has been translated as the Book of Changes, and it's not a mistake, but it's a partial translation, as you say. It's yin and yang, so you have to get the becoming, but you also have to get the being. So if I have some influence, I would suggest not to translate I Ching by the Book of Change, but I would suggest to translate it as being and becoming.
Excellent. So let's look, Quan, you're very creative. Come up with some ideas, suggest some ideas. We will go ahead and we can do like meetups. I want to do unusual meetups just to show what I Ching can do. So just, propose some things, just email me and we will work.
I already have an idea.
Go ahead.
Of course, we wouldn't use the short. We would use the short method, because doing it with the yarrow stick would be too long. Okay, but I would suggest that we would together make an hexagram. Okay. For example, one person would toss 3 coins.
Yep.
And he would create the first line, and 5 others would complete the hexagram.
Okay.
And we would discuss the hexagram together, and with the theoretical elements that I would offer, it would be funnier than just reading the Shuyi, for example.
Wonderful. Let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll figure out. Give me about a few days, and let's figure out some time, and let's do this.
And
right?
and we would do like in the past, meaning that the person would have to write his name on a paper, write the questions, write 3 answers, and we discuss after that exactly like it has been done and it's still done nowadays.
Wonderful. Let's do that. Let's do that. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to future I Ching meetups, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.